Our next question is from Kat in Sacramento.
I was just wondering if you had any tips on how to worry less and be a little less indecisive, because that is something that I really struggle with. And I waste so much time worrying about every little thing, and it just causes me unnecessary stress.
So, Ryan, it sounds to me like Kat wants some tips on how to be, the way she phrased it was be less indecisive. And the thing that I think about is to be less indecisive, you have to be more decisive. Right. And so instead of being less indecisive, it's really about how can I be more decisive in my day-to-day decisions. So I've got some basic tips because she asked for tips about worrying less. And I promise I won't spend a whole lot of time on these because they're basic, but they're important. They're a foundation to consider. The first off, are you sleeping enough? Mm-hmm. Are you exercising enough? I know for me, those two things will radically reduce my anxiety. In fact, if I'm feeling really anxious and overwhelmed, one of the things I'll do is go try to take a nap. It doesn't always work for me, but I will lay down at least, and I'll put on my headphones with the Brain FM app, and I will just set it for either 20, 30, or 45 minutes. And I would just lay there and let my mind sort of wander. It's meditative. Sometimes I'll actually fall asleep and I'll wake up like, oh, I'm not feeling as anxious now, because your breath slows, your body calms down. Even if you don't actually fall into one of the stages of sleep, you feel a lot better afterward, because it's like defragging your hard drive in your mind, so to speak. And exercise. For me, it can be something just quick and brisk. There's a hill right by my apartment, and so I'll walk up that hill and then walk around the block and walk back down, and it gets my heartbeat going for 15, 20 minutes or so, and then all of a sudden, once you do that, you become more in sync with your body.
Absolutely.
I just ordered an exercise bike so that I can make sure I'm getting my heart rate up. And whenever I feel anxious, I'm just going to hop on that for 20, maybe 30 minutes. And that'll totally change my state.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, man. Meditation helps a lot too. Anytime... when I'm meditating on a regular basis, I am able to, be more decisive, but my stress level is much more under control.
Yeah.
Meaning, all it does is it allows you to this is how it works for me. Uh-huh. It allows me to take a thought that is really, really bothering me, causing me stress, interrupting my day, and I can kind of compartmentalize that and say, yes, that is a problem. Uh-huh. That is something that, maybe it's something I can address. Maybe it's, we were talking about my dad last episode. Maybe it's something there where there's nothing I can do. I am at a point where it's like, I look at that thought and I say, you know what, man, I've done everything I can, and I'm going to go ahead and continue to focus about going about my day and not let this angst ruin it, ruin the rest of my day. And if it wasn't for the meditate, and I don't meditate a ton. If I'm meditating every day, it's for 5 to 10 minutes a day. Sometimes it'll turn into 20, 30 minutes. Uh-huh. But Mariah and I, we've been trying to meditate with each other for at least 5 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, I am able to go through that process a lot easier, hands down, dude. It's very much like the sleep, I would think. Yeah, kind of the same scientific reasoning.
Our friend Dan Harris says 1 minute is meditating. So it's sort of the gateway into doing longer. Dan meditates for 2 hours a day every day, which is phenomenal, and I think it's radically changed his life. Now, meditation is not the miracle drug; it is simply one tool. And I like the idea of the metaphor of compartmentalizing something for a second. Like the thoughts about your dad, clearly they're not useful, right? You've already come to terms with it. You've dealt with it. You've had a funeral for the relationship, as you talked about in the last episode. But taking that thought and sort of putting it in this compartment, and then letting that compartment go.
Yeah.
And in a way, meditation allows you to let go of those thoughts.
Yeah, it allows me to, or it helps me to be more accepting of life. It helps me to, basically it helps me to lower my expectations and raise my standards.
Yes.
My standard is yes, I'm not going to ruminate on stress, but I don't expect that there's going to be zero stress in my life.
And if you don't have time to meditate, you can't take a nap right now, one thing that really helps me out, and there's some science behind this just within the last few years, if you take 6 deep breaths.
Oh, yeah.
And for whatever reason, it's 6. Like the science shows that minimum of 6. You just do the let it out. If you can hold it for a few seconds as well, 6 of those will radically change your state, and it will radically reduce your anxiety levels. Now, maybe it reduces by 30%. That's a pretty radical reduction. For Ella, I've realized I was trying to get her to do the 6, and she just started hyperventilating because 6 is a big number for a 5-year-old because trying to do 6 of anything is like just too much. And so she would just start, and it would produce more anxiety in her because I'm like, all right, Ella, we need to take 6 deep breaths. And she just, and so now it's like, hey, let's take 1 deep breath. Let's hold it in together for a few seconds, and then just let it out. And that really helps. And then if I can get her past 1, then can we do 1 more deep breath? If I can get her to do 2 or 3, it often changes her state. And then when she becomes less anxious, I become less anxious. Another thing that I do when I'm doing non-creative work, so if I'm checking emails or doing phone calls, whatever, I wear a wristwatch. I don't have it on now, but with a 22-minute timer on it. So you can set it on your phone or whatever, and it just vibrates every 22 minutes. And I get up, and I will do some form of exercise. I'll either do like 20 squats, or I'll do 10 pull-ups, or I will do 50 push-ups, just something to get change my state, and I go right back to working. So less than a minute or so, less than 2 minutes for sure, and I go back to 20 minutes of email or whatever, and that continues to help me with my anxiety. You mentioned meditation, so I think the thing we need to ask, Ryan, that we need to ask Kat here is the thing that we asked each other at the top of this. Like, Kat, what is actually triggering your anxiety? Because you might say that, like, well, I don't know. I'm just anxious all the time. I don't know what's actually triggering my anxiety.
Well, it's the decision making, she said, right?
Right, but so let's keep going. Let's follow that anxiety to what are the specific decisions. My guess is there are certain decisions for her that are really difficult, and so she puts them off, right? She's making decisions every single day, so it's not every decision that is making her anxious.
Right.
Like maybe she decided to drink water right now. That's not making her anxious. And so what are the decisions that are making you anxious? What are those triggers? And then instead of hiding from them, instead of running away from them, you want to become brave enough to run toward them, right?
Yeah.
And so that worry is just a word that means fear, basically, right? And so it reminded me of this essay that I've got here somewhere about fear. Minimalism Kills Fear. This is on our website. This is an oldie but a goodie. This is from 2010.
It's a good one, man.
And there are some exercises in here I just want to read. So you and I, when we first started the Minimalists.com, we started with this 21-day journey into minimalism, which followed your 21 days of the packing party and letting go of those things. But along the way, there were sort of these aha moments. And one of them had to do with fear. And so this is what we wrote about that. And we'll put a link to this essay in the show notes as well. We're all afraid of something. Some of our fears are obvious. Spiders, heights, X's. Other fears are less pronounced, less obvious, like the fear of loss, the loss of things, the loss of acceptance, the loss of love. Sometimes we're afraid to give up what we think we have. Fear traps us. It prevents us from growing. It prevents us from contributing to other people. It prevents us from living happy, satisfied, fulfilled, free lives. So think about that for a second. If you're worrying, you're really just afraid. That worry prevents you from having a fulfilled, free life. It gets in the way of satisfaction quite often.
Yeah.
Fear is the antithesis of freedom. It is, by definition, constricting. We often hold on to things because we're afraid to get rid of them. We fear losing those things because we think we might need them. We don't just fear the loss of these things, though. We fear the loss of what these things might mean to us in some distant hypothetical future. When you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous. Try it. I'm afraid of getting rid of this t-shirt. It's something we actually worry about, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if I get rid of this? But when
I'm afraid I'm going to miss it. I'm afraid I'm going to want it one day. I'm afraid that I'm going to need it just in case. I'm afraid that a friend's going to need it just in case.
Right. I'm afraid to get rid of this t-shirt because it could have a serious impact on my life in the future. Sounds ridiculous, right? So there's an obvious question we must ask ourselves when we're holding on to something. Why am I afraid of getting rid of this? Now, something can be a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I afraid of getting? But it could also be like, why are you actually afraid, Kat? Why are you afraid of making a decision?
Mm.
What are you actually afraid of? And then saying it out loud, it might seem banal on the surface, but it's actually a great question to ask when you're faced with these difficult decisions. Give it a try. So you don't want to say no to that person. What am I really afraid of?
Mm. Yeah.
You can't write. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go for it.
Well, you can't write the novel you've been dreaming of writing? Why? What are you afraid of? I can't learn to play the instrument I've always wanted to play. I mean, why? What are you afraid of? You're going to be bad? Of course you're going to be bad at first. Everyone who ever picked up guitar was bad at first.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who ever...
I'm still pretty bad.
Yes. And you've picked up a guitar a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
So have I, and I'm still pretty bad at it, and that's okay. And so it goes on. I can't exercise and eat healthy foods. I mean, this is something we tell ourselves. Like, I couldn't do that. It's just too difficult. It's not realistic for me to exercise every day.
It's funny. That made me think, man, food is such a... Like, it's the social media. It's another social media. It's another pacifier to anxiety.
Yeah, and so I can't eat healthy. Why? What are you afraid of, right? I can't quit the job I hate to pursue what I'm passionate about. Why? What are you afraid of? I can't fill in the blank. What are you afraid of? And I think it's important to ask that question. The answer to this question is almost always ridiculous. I'm afraid people won't like me anymore. I'm afraid people won't love me anymore. I'm afraid people won't respect me anymore. Chances are you have manufactured these false fears, and it is these manufactured fears that keep you from doing what you want to do. Or in the case of our physical items, it's the fears that keep you from getting rid of the certain things that have no real value, things that don't have any real meaning in your life. We have good news, though. Fear is a choice, and thus anxiety is often a choice when you figure out what are those triggers, right? And so I'll put a link to this, or Sean can put a link to this in the show notes. You can take a look at it. We've got some exercises in here that you can do to get rid of those fears. In addition to asking that question, what are you afraid of?
I like that essay. That's an awesome one, dude. Another good one. I think you actually have it there. The Paths.
Oh yeah.
Essay.
Yeah.
So from Kat, I totally feel you on this. Being scared to make a decision, especially the important decisions. Am I going to go to college, or am I gonna just try and do something on my own? Am I going to go into debt to buy a big house, or am I just gonna continue to rent? I mean, there are these major decisions that can be paralyzing, because if we make the wrong decision,
right,
it can be detrimental, or it can set us back 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. So I totally. I can empathize, because I've been there, and I'm sure Kat is experiencing a little bit of that. But Kat, here's what I will say. I don't know if you're going to read that Paths essay or not.
I'm going to save that for the Patreon postscript. But
cool.
There's a separate essay here to talk about too.
Go ahead, yeah. Let's and we can put a link in for the Paths episode podcast. Sean, you can put a note in the show notes there for Kat to read. But you know, ultimately, Kat, like you do have to figure out a way to trust in yourself. She has to figure out a way to make these decisions without that fear of the consequence. And what I mean by that is so if she's deciding to buy a house, this can be a good or a bad decision.
Yes.
There's not just a blanket statement to say, well, buying a house is a good or a bad decision.
Right.
So the way that Kat is going to make good decisions is she's going to consider every single possibility, every option she has. Mm-hmm. She's going to consider how it affects her life, how it affects the people around her, how it affects their lives. And ultimately, Kat, like you're going to have to make the best decision given with the given information that you have.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but here's the thing, Kat, is sometimes you're going to make a bad decision. It's going to happen. We all make bad decisions sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you have done everything you can to make the best decision for yourself and something goes wrong, that's good news.
Yes.
You get to learn from it.
Yeah.
You get to learn to not make that decision again.
And sometimes the bad decisions can be really bad. Sometimes they can be fairly innocuous, right?
Yeah, pretty benign.
And so here's this essay, another one. It's called The Worst Thing That Could Happen. This is from our book, Essential. It says, risk scares the crap out of us. And this is going to be a great question for Kat to ask. There's a couple questions in here. Many of us associate risk with failure with pain. Yet we're told we must take plenty of risks to succeed. Thus, success must be painful, right? Not necessarily. When it comes to challenging our preconceived notions about risk, the common platitudinal question tossed around by kind-hearted friends and self-help gurus is, what's the worst thing that could happen? And so sometimes think about that for a second. Like sometimes we'll say, well, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Dude, that was
right?
like my grandpa's biggest piece of advice to me.
Really?
Yeah, he's like, any decision that you have to make, think about the worst thing that can happen.
Right.
If you can accept that scenario, if you can accept that consequence, then do it.
Right. Yeah. And so
actually made me do some really shitty decisions growing up, but
well, and I think that's why this essay is helpful, because it helps you ask another question on top
yes,
of that.
absolutely, better questions.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
truth be told, some risks are fairly benign. Letting go of most of your material possessions, asking a cute guy or girl out, for his phone number, writing the first page of
Can I have your phone number, Josh?
yes.
Nice.
Writing the first page of the book you've always wanted to write. What's the worst thing that could happen? Likely nothing at all. Like if you do, if you really like someone, you want to go ask them for their phone number. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Get rejected.
Yeah, literally nothing happens though, right?
Yeah.
You're rejected and nothing happens. What happens if you write the first page of the book and it's terrible? Nothing actually happens.
If you delete it, you can't prove anything happened.
Right. There's no real risk in these harmless endeavors. Other risks, however, probably should scare the shit out of you. Skydiving, purchasing a home, quitting your job. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, some pretty awful stuff, actually. Death, debt, and poverty, respectively. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take these risks. It means you should approach each risk with logic, reason, and intuition. You should peer over the edge before taking your proverbial leap. And if it makes sense, then leap, because not leaping can be a much bigger risk.